All right, readers, let's go ahead and let's look at chapter 5 of our book, The Bell Bandit. Some wacky things have been happening so far, so I'm super excited to read more with you. Chapter 5, A Thousand Pieces. The next morning, Jessie sat with her grandmother at the dining room table and ripped the cellophane wrapper off the box of the new jigsaw puzzle. She couldn't wait to get started. Grandma looked like herself this morning. She had slept 12 hours last night, and at breakfast, she'd given Jessie and Evan a giant bear hug. They'd even exchanged their Christmas gifts. Grandma was wearing the scarf that Jessie had knit for her draped over her shoulders, and Jessie had a brand new calligraphy pen and 2 jars of metallic ink waiting for her upstairs in her room. Evan's present from Grandma was a magic set, and he had given her a Christmas cactus covered in pink blossoms. That looks good enough to eat, said Grandma, staring at the picture of the puzzle that Jessie set up on one end of the table like a billboard. The brightly colored jelly beans reminded Jessie of Christmas lights all in a tangled pile. They even seemed to glisten and glow like the lights on the tree. It was the most beautiful puzzle she had ever seen, and the hardest. It took Jessie and Grandma nearly 10 minutes just to spread out all the pieces on the table and turn each one right side up. Then they had to separate out all of the straight edge pieces that would form the outside frame. When they had finished, they stopped and studied the puzzle. They all looked the same, said Jessie. It was true. Even though the pieces were different shapes, the picture on each one was basically the same. There was no way to pick one out from the others. Jessie had never done a puzzle like this before. She didn't know where to begin. 4 corners, said Grandma, tapping the table. That's how we always start, right? So they searched through the puzzle pieces until they found the 4 corner pieces and matched those to the picture to figure out which corner went where. Then they began the slow process of building off the corners to create the outside frame of the puzzle. Grandma, tell me about the New Year's Eve bell, said Jessie. She had been waiting all morning to ask her grandmother about the bell, but she was nervous. Mrs. Tresky had warned both children, try not to say anything that might upset her, and she had told Jessie specifically, don't talk about how the bell is missing. Well, what do you want to know? She asked Grandma, fitting a puzzle piece onto her side of the frame. Where did it come from? My great grandfather put it there to call the neighbors in case of an emergency. Like what? Asked Jessie. What kind of emergency? She was hunting for a straight edge piece with a purple jelly bean on it. Oh, all kinds of things. If someone was sick, or if there was a lost child, or a fire, or a pack of wolves getting into the sheep. Back in 1884, over the years, Jessie had traced her fingers over the date on the bell 100 times. She knew the inscription by heart. The Jones Troy Bell, Foundry Company, Troy, New York, 1884. I sound the alarm to keep the peace. The letters were as tall as her thumb. That's when the bell was cast, Jessie's grandma nodded. That's when the bell was hung. How did they hang it? Asked Jessie. It must have weighed 1,000 pounds. Oh no, said Grandma, scratching her earlobe, which is what she did when she concentrated. It doesn't weigh that much. Maybe 100 pounds. 2 men could hang that bell easily. One time, years and years ago, the bell needed to be cleaned, so I lifted it off the hooks and dragged it back to the house on a sledge all by myself. Of course, it's a lot easier to take the bell down than it is to hang it up. You took the bell down? Asked Jessie. When? Oh, years ago. A long time ago, just after your grandfather died. I was still young and strong back then, not like now. Grandma turned a puzzle piece around in her hand, seeing if it would fit, but then put it back with the others on the table. Grandma, Jessie asked in a near whisper, did you take the bell down sometime this year? Grandma laughed. Oh, what a thing. No, I couldn't take that bell down anymore. That old bell is still up there on Lovell's Hill, always will be. She had stopped working on the puzzle and using her good hand to rub her shoulder as if it ached. Maybe you want to sell it? Asked Jessie, thinking of the appraisal letter. No, Jessie, I would never sell the New Year's Eve bell. Maybe you forgot? I didn't forget, Jessie, said Grandma, shaking her head. But you could have. No, her grandmother dropped her hand to the table so that it made a sharp rapping sound. Now stop, Jessie. The bell is on the hill. It always been there and it will always be there. So enough. Okay, Grandma, said Jessie, but inside she wondered if maybe her grandma's forgetfulness was a clue to the mystery of the missing bell. They worked on the puzzle for another minute in silence, and then Jessie heard a strange thud at the front door. When she got up to investigate, she found Maxwell standing in front of the house with skis on his feet and ski poles in one hand. In his other hand, he had a snowball, and Jessie noticed the spot of white on the floor where he had already thrown one. You're home, said Maxwell. Uh-huh, said Jessie. They stared at each other for a minute, Maxwell rocking back and forth on his skis, Jessie with her arms crossed in front of her. It's not polite to ask someone to invite you in, said Maxwell. Why not? Asked Jessie. I don't know, said Maxwell. It's just a rule my mother taught me. It doesn't make sense. How's a person supposed to know you want to get invited in if you don't ask? She wondered why they were talking about this. It was a strange topic for Maxwell to bring up out of the blue. But it's a rule, he said. Maxwell, Jessie's grandma had come to open the door. Did you want to come inside? Uh-huh, he said, using his pole to unsnap his boots from his skis. Jessie followed her grandma back into the house with Maxwell right behind. It's a good thing you're here, said Grandma. I need to go lie down for a few minutes, and Jessie needs a puzzle partner. Want to take over? She asked, pointing to the dining room table. Maxwell didn't even answer. He just walked over to the table and sat down in the chair that Grandma had left empty. Prepare to be amazed, Grandma said to Jessie, and then she headed up the stairs. When Jessie sat in her seat, Maxwell had already fit together 3 pieces, but they weren't pieces of the outside frame of the puzzle. They were pieces that belonged in the vast, empty middle, the part of the puzzle Jessie hadn't even tried to solve yet. And he kept finding more. He fit another piece into the 3 he already joined, and then another. His eyes roamed quickly over the pieces, and he moved his hands over them too, his fingers snapping and wiggling as he thought about which piece to pick up next. Sometimes he made a mistake, a near miss, but just as often he got the right piece on the first try. Snap, the piece fit in perfectly, and then Maxwell started to look for the next one. How do you do that? Asked Jessie. She was really good at jigsaw puzzles, the best in the family, the best anyone she knew, but she couldn't start in the middle of a 1,000-piece puzzle, especially one that was a picture of nothing but jelly beans. I'm smart, said Maxwell, continuing to add pieces. Snap, snap. Well, I'm smart too, but I can't do that, she said. She tried to concentrate on the frame she was building, but Maxwell's movements were so annoying, she couldn't keep her mind on what she was doing. Jelly beans, said Maxwell, snapping his fingers and looking at the pieces. Yeah, jelly beans, said Jessie, absent-mindedly. Grandma calls me Jessie Bean. Why? Asked Maxwell. It's a nickname. I hate nicknames, Maxwell said loudly. Nicknames are mean. Jessie looked up surprised. She always thought the same thing, but had never heard anyone say it before. Yeah, I hate nicknames too. I wish everyone would just call people by their real names, right? Right, said Maxwell, snapping another piece in place. He pointed at the cluster of puzzle pieces he had fit together. You don't see that every day. What? Asked Jessie, looking at the pieces. Oklahoma, said Maxwell. And sure enough, Jessie could see that the pieces were made a shape that looked like Oklahoma. Jessie watched as Maxwell added piece after piece to the puzzle. You know what? She said. I like to do puzzles all by myself without any help. This wasn't true, but it was no fun doing a puzzle with someone who could finish the whole thing before you even got a corner done. It was like someone giving you the answer to a math problem before you even started. Let's do something else. What do you want to do? Get smart, said Maxwell. What? The best TV show ever made, Get Smart. 6 seasons, 1965 to 1970, 138 episodes produced in all. Maxwell walked over to the TV cabinet and opened the lower cupboard. Inside, Grandma had a few DVDs, mostly babyish movies that Jesse and Evan didn't watch anymore. But Maxwell pulled out a box set that Jesse had never seen before. Get Smart was the title, and there was a picture of a man in a suit and a tie looking very surprised. Season 1, the pilot episode, said Maxwell. He popped the DVD in the player, and they both sat down on the couch to watch. The title of the first episode was Mr. Big. It was a funny show. Jesse laughed and laughed. There was this dopey secret agent who worked for a super secret government agency called Control. The agent's name was Maxwell Smart, but his code name was Agent 86. I get it, she said, turning to Maxwell. That's why you say you're smart all the time. Maxwell Smart. It's a joke. Maxwell bobbed his head up and down. Yep, my name is Maxwell and I'm smart. That's what Mrs. Joyce always says. She says, you're smart, Maxwell. It's a joke. Maxwell Smart was a no-nonsense secret agent. He liked to take charge, and he was always confident he would catch the criminal in the end. Some people might think he was kind of bossy, but Jesse thought he was great. There was another secret agent, a dark-haired woman named Agent 99, and a dog named K13. Together, they got to use all kinds of great gadgets like Bino-Specs, an inflato coat, and a shoe phone. Jesse especially loved the Bino-Specs. We should do that, she said at the end of the first episode. We should be like spies and have a stakeout and figure out who stole the bell. We could solve the crime, just like Maxwell Smart and Agent 99. Okay, said Maxwell, let's do that. No, I mean for real, said Jesse. Real secret agents, not just pretend. Okay, said Maxwell, let's do that. Really? Said Jesse. She was surprised that Maxwell agreed with her right away. She figured it would take a while to convince a sixth grader to go along with her plan. After all, she was only a fourth grader and a pretty young one at that. We have to think of something fast, she said. New Year's Eve is the day after tomorrow. It's like a puzzle, said Maxwell. You're right, it's like a puzzle, and I'm good at puzzles. Me too, said Maxwell. I'm smart.